Imagine holding a fragment of a heartbeat that stopped 40 million years ago, perfectly frozen, yet still pulsing with a terrifying immediacy. You look at a smooth, golden tier of stone, warm to the touch and deceptively serene, sitting quietly on a velvet display tray. It looks entirely harmless, like a drop of solidified honey or a piece of cheap costume jewelry. But this harmless golden pebble is not a mineral, and it does not merely record the past. It devours it whole, preserving the exact second of an ancient violent execution in flawless three-dimensional horror, while ordinary fossils offer nothing but cold. Flat stone copies of bones and teeth, the mere skeletal debris of death, this substance acts as a cosmic stasis chamber. It does not wait for the flesh to rot or the terrain to slowly crush the remains into dust. Instead, it strikes like a sudden, atmospheric paralysis, sealing the softest tissues, the wet sheen of an eye, and the microscopic hairs on a panicked wing from the destructive reach of oxygen. It is the only material on our planet that refuses to let the past decay, locking away the fragile geometry of life exactly as it was lived. Look closer into the translucent depths of this golden vault, and the domestic tranquility of nature dissolves into a theater of ancient brutal betrayals. A spider crouches in a state of permanent eternal arousal, forever waiting for a mate that will never arrive. Nearby, an aggressive tick is locked in a perpetual struggle, its mouth parts buried deep into the head of a frantic ant, a parasite and its host welded together in a single breathless instant of mutual doom. In another golden chamber, a predator is caught mid-leap. A hunting spider launches an assault on a wasp, while the wasp, in that very microsecond, was busy plundering the spider's own nest to steal its unborn eggs. These are not staged exhibits or artistic recreations. These are real, breathing moments of panic and instinct from a world that existed up to 100 million years ago, petrified in a flash by a thick, suffocating tide of prehistoric armor. Even the intimate, desperate act of reproduction is intercepted. Two flies remain fused together in the middle of mating, their final procreative impulse transformed into a display piece that has outlasted continents. Where did this terrifyingly effective preservative come from? It began not with a geological upheaval, but as a weapon of desperate survival deployed by trees that no human eye has ever seen alive. This golden stone is the hardened, fossilized blood of an ancient, extinct forest. Not the watery sap that feeds the leaves, but a sticky, chemical counteroffensive. When a prehistoric tree was pierced by a boring insect, cracked by a violent storm, or threatened by a creeping fungal infection, it fought back by secreting a thick, suffocating wave of resin. This resin was an organic polymer, a liquid shield designed to seal wounds and smother invaders. It oozed down the bark, a slow-moving, golden trap, completely invisible to the organisms scurrying beneath it. A foraging beetle, an ant rushing along a branch, a stray feather drifting from a primitive bird, or a heavy drop of tropical rainwater. Anything that touched this deceptive surface was instantly swallowed when the ancient trees eventually succumbed to time and crashed into the forest floor. This resinous armor was buried deep beneath massive layers of heavy sediment. Over tens of millions of years, an immense, silent alchemy took place beneath the earth. Deprived of air and subjected to crushing tectonic pressures, the volatile, lightweight molecules within the resin slowly evaporated, forcing the remaining carbon chains to link together into impossibly long, rigid structures. The sticky fluid transformed into a resilient, organic masterwork. Yet, this substance did more than just trap the fragile bodies of prehistoric insects. It sealed away the literal breath of the ancient world. The tiny, shimmering bubbles trapped within its golden matrix are not structural flaws or aesthetic defects. They are pristine planetary archives. Each bubble is an unruptured capsule containing a sample of the Earth's atmosphere from the age of the dinosaurs. By piercing these microscopic vacuum seals in sterile laboratories, modern science can measure exactly how much oxygen filled the lungs of giant reptiles and chart the shifting, volatile climate of a lost era. It is a museum and a time capsule, an atmospheric ledger all contained within a stone that fits in the palm of your hand. Humanity quickly realized that this strange, warm stone possessed an uncanny, almost supernatural power that defied the known laws of nature. Thousands of years before the invention of writing or the forging of iron, ancient hunters collected these golden nuggets from the frozen coastlines, carving them into small amulets to ward off the dark. They noticed that if you took this golden material and rubbed it vigorously against a piece of rough animal fur, it began to exhibit a bizarre invisible hunger. It did not use glue or moisture, yet it would effortlessly wrench light objects, feathers, straw, and dried leaves, right off the ground, pulling them toward its surface like an organic magnet. The ancient Greeks, mesmerized by this eerie, attractive force named the golden substance electron, meaning the shining sun. They believed it was woven from the literal rays of their star, an object of pure celestial energy brought down to Earth. They could not have possibly anticipated that 2,000 years later, this very name would be resurrected by modern investigators to describe the foundational force running through our entire civilization. Every wire, every glowing screen, and every hum of power grid in your home owes its scientific name to a piece of prehistoric tree resin rubbed against a scrap of wool. This stone did not just spark the birth of physical science, it ignited a ruthless, continent-spanning greed that reshaped human history and altered the maps of empires. In the ancient world, its value was so absolute that a tiny, masterfully carved golden figurine was worth far more than a healthy adult human slave. The Roman Emperor Nero, a tyrant obsessed with grand spectacles and absolute luxury, became so infatuated with its golden luster that he dispatched an entire military expedition into the perilous, uncharted wilderness of the Baltic coast, with a single directive: seize every fragment of the sunstone available. The soldiers returned with tons of the material, and by Nero's personal decree, the massive protective nets separating the bloody slaughter of the Colosseum from the royal box were entirely encrusted with these prehistoric tears. To the elite of Rome, the stone was a divine luxury. They burned its pale varieties in temple censers to release a rich aromatic smoke to the gods, and drank its powdered form, dissolved in fine wine, to soothe the frantic fluttering of an ailing heart. But while empires bartered fortunes for this petrified resin, the true dark nature of its most magnificent human creation was waiting to unleash a curse that would haunt the 20th century. But the real horror was yet to be discovered. To understand how this golden phantom completely breaks the rules of biological decay, we have to look past its smooth, gem-like surface and descend into a chaotic, microscopic battlefield. In the conventional kingdom of geology, a true mineral is a masterpiece of rigid, geometric perfection. Crystals like amethyst, emerald, or diamond are built like flawless architectural fortresses. Their atoms are locked into a strict, unchanging, three-dimensional grid that repeats infinitely through space. They possess a definitive chemical formula, a predictable soul. But this golden substance scorns such sterile regularity. Science does not even classify it as a true mineral, but rather as a mineraloid, an amorphous, organic outlaw that completely lacks a crystal lattice. It possesses no fixed chemical formula, no neat molecular blueprint. It is a shifting, complex macromolecular network, a tangled labyrinth of ancient carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen that refuse to obey the standard laws of crystallization. This structural anarchy is precisely what makes it a perfect kinetic trap. When a prehistoric tree suffered a deep fracture, it did not just bleed a passive fluid. It unleashed a highly complex chemical weapon system. This weapon was a thick, volatile cocktail of liquid hydrocarbons known as terpenes and resin acids. In its initial state, this substance was a viscous, sticky prison, acting like a microscopic quicksand. The moment a prehistoric organism made contact with this weeping gold, its fate was sealed by a dual mechanism of physical suffocation and chemical mummification, unlike water, which allows bacteria to thrive and fuel the process of putrefaction, or mud, which crushes delicate forms under sheer physical weight. This fluid functioned as a total planetary quarantine. As it rolled over a captured victim, it filled every crevice, every microscopic pore, and every respiratory passage, completely displacing all air and moisture. It built an absolute impermeable wall against the twin engine of biological destruction, oxygen and water. Without oxygen, the legions of airborne bacteria and ravening microbes that normally tear dead flesh apart within hours were instantly suffocated. Their destructive enzymes paralyzed before they could even begin to dismantle a single cell. Once the organism was entirely engulfed, the second phase of this deep time preservation mechanism began, a slow, beautiful process of organic polymerization that spanned across millions of years. As the heavy fluid was buried beneath massive blankets of coastal silt and river sediment, the volatile components, the lightweight molecules that gave the fresh resin its intense, aromatic scent, began to slowly evaporate and escape into the surrounding earth. This left behind the heavier, highly complex resinous structures, which found themselves subjected to immense, relentless geothermal heat and crushing tectonic pressures deep within the planetary crust. Under these extreme conditions, a spectacular molecular dance took place. The individual isolated molecules of the resin, known as monomers, began to violently collide and break their internal chemical bonds. Seeking stability in the darkness, they reached out and bound themselves to one another, linking up into incredibly long, intricate, three-dimensional chains. This is the exact definition of natural polymerization, the spontaneous creation of a giant hyper-durable plastic matrix directly inside the Earth's sedimentary furnace. The liquid prison slowly hardened into a solid, cross-linked organic polymer, trapping the mummified organism inside a permanent, unyielding tomb of fossilized carbon. However, within this global family of fossilized resins, there exists a single, elite branch that possesses a biochemical passport found nowhere else on Earth. While there are over 120 distinct types of prehistoric resins scattered across the continents, only the legendary variety gathered from the cold shores of the Baltic Sea is recognized by science as true succinite. This distinction is driven by a unique chemical signature, the presence of an extraordinary compound known as succinic acid, comprising up to 8% of the stone's total chemical weight. This specific acid is a profound evolutionary link between the ancient rock and the machinery of modern life. If you were to look inside your own body right now, you would find this exact same chemical operating at the very core of your survival. Within the microscopic power plants of your cells, the mitochondria, succinic acid plays an irreplaceable role in the Krebs cycle, the fundamental biochemical engine that converts nutrients into the vital energy that keeps you alive. When the pioneer of mineralogy, Georg Agricola, first heated this golden stone in the 16th century, he watched in astonishment as a white, crystalline frost sublimated out of the vapor. He had inadvertently isolated this acid, unaware that he was holding the foundational building block of a future industrial revolution. Today, this substance is no longer just a historical curiosity. It has been crowned by global energy sectors as a vital pillar of sustainable chemistry by utilizing engineered microorganisms to ferment agricultural waste. Modern chemical laboratories can now produce this identical acid to manufacture revolutionary, biodegradable plastics that dissolve completely back into the earth within a few short years, bypassing the toxic legacy of petroleum. The ancient defensive weapon of a dying, prehistoric forest has transformed into the ultimate tool for preserving our ecological future. Yet, just when science believed it had completely mapped the chemical boundaries of this material, a spectacular optical phenomenon emerged from the Caribbean to challenge our understanding of light itself. If you journey to the tropical hills of the Dominican Republic, you will encounter a variety of this petrified resin that looks completely standard under ordinary indoor lighting. A warm, translucent honey yellow. But the moment you step out into the brilliant glare of natural sunlight, the stone undergoes a breathtaking, almost impossible transformation. The golden surface suddenly erupts into an intense, glowing electric blue, as if a vibrant neon lamp had been ignited deep within its core. This is not a trick of pigment, nor is it caused by artificial dyes or chemical alterations. It is a manifestation of pure molecular physics known as photoluminescence. Deep within this specific variety of resin lie rare, highly complex polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, specifically a compound known as perylene. When the intense invisible ultraviolet rays of the sun strike the stone, these perylene molecules instantly absorb the high-energy radiation, causing their electrons to violently leap into a highly unstable, excited state. Unable to hold this excess energy, the electrons immediately cascade back down to their ground state, releasing the leftover energy not as heat, but as a lower energy, visible wavelength of light, a piercing radiant blue. This fluorescent glow occurs exclusively on the outermost skin of the stone, where the sunlight directly hits it. If you look straight through the material against a bright backdrop, it remains resolutely yellow. It is an optical illusion born from a 20-million-year-old chemical secret, an ancient polymer that literally reshapes the light of our star, transforming the invisible forces of the cosmos into a visual spectacle of neon fire. While science was busy decoding the molecular architecture of this glowing blue phantom, a darker, far more volatile human obsession was forging a path of blood, secrecy, and vanished fortunes across the European continent. For centuries, this petrified resin was treated not as a mere specimen of natural history, but as an absolute instrument of geopolitical power. In the dark ages of the northern seas, a brutal monastic empire known as the Teutonic Order declared absolute ownership over every single fragment of the sunstone that washed onto the Baltic shores. They constructed a totalitarian monopoly so merciless that the simple act of picking up a golden pebble from the sand without royal authorization was deemed a crime against the state. Specialized enforcement officers patrolled the beaches, and anyone caught concealing a piece of the fossilized resin was summarily executed on the spot, their bodies left hanging from wooden gallows erected directly on the shoreline as a grim warning to the local population. The order understood that this material was a liquid asset that could be carved into sacred rosaries and traded to the royal shepherds of Europe for astronomical wealth. But this early reign of terror was merely a faint prelude to the most audacious, extravagant, and tragic artistic endeavor in human history, a creation born from absolute royal vanity that would eventually trigger a global detective hunt spanning over 8 decades. The year was 1701. The newly crowned Prussian monarch, hungry for a monument that would visually stun his rivals, commissioned a project that defied architectural logic, an entire room constructed entirely out of fossilized resin. The finest master craftsmen of Northern Europe were gathered in secret workshops, tasked with transforming over 6 tons of raw, brittle, and highly volatile amber into monolithic interlocking wall panels. Every square inch of the design was carved, polished, and assembled by hand into a dazzling tapestry of fiery mosaics, royal crests, and glowing high-relief carvings. When the completed panels were later presented as a lavish diplomatic gift to the Russian Tsar, Peter the Great, the masterwork was installed within the sweeping halls of the Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg. Expanded by imperial architects with massive mirrors and Florentine gemstones, the hall became a breathtaking architectural anomaly, a 300-square-foot chamber where 3 walls were entirely sheathed in glowing, petrified gold from floor to ceiling. When the afternoon sun cut through the tall palace windows, the room did not merely reflect the light. The walls literally ignited from within, casting a deep, warm topaz radiance that blinded the senses. It was universally hailed as the 8th wonder of the world, a monument to human ambition that appeared entirely immortal. But the terrifying vulnerability of this golden treasure was exposed in the terrifying crucible of the Second World War. As the armored columns of the Der Germano tore across the Soviet frontier in the autumn of 1941, the curators of the Catherine Palace found themselves trapped in a desperate race against time. The advancing front line was moving too fast, and the legendary amber panels were far too fragile, brittle, and prone to shattering to be safely dismantled and evacuated to the east. In a frantic final act of desperation, the museum staff attempted to hide the masterpiece in plain sight, covering the glowing walls with heavy layers of paper, cotton padding, gauze in the hope that the invading forces would mistake the hall for a common storage area. The deception failed completely. Specialized Nazi art looting detachments, working under direct imperial orders to reclaim what they viewed as stolen Germanic heritage, discovered the hidden room within hours of occupying the palace. Armed with precision tools, expert technicians systematically stripped the delicate panels from the walls in less than 36 hours, packing the 6 tons of glowing history into dozens of heavily reinforced wooden crates. The stolen wonder was loaded onto military transports and shipped back to the fortified Prussian city of Königsberg, where it was proudly reassembled inside the Grand State Museum of the royal castle. For a brief, tense window of time, the golden room glowed once more under the shadow of the swastika. Then the sky fell. In the late summer of 1944, waves of British heavy bombers unleashed a firestorm that completely vaporized the medieval heart of Königsberg, leaving the royal castle a smoking, hollowed-out concrete shell. As the Red Army advanced to lay siege to the burning city, the director of the Königsberg Museum sent one final cryptic encrypted message to his high command in Berlin, confirming that the priceless amber panels had been hastily dismantled once again and hidden deep within an impenetrable underground bunker network beneath the castle ruins. When Soviet forces finally breached the smoking subterranean vaults in the SP Ring of 1945, they found a vast labyrinth of plundered European treasures. But the wooden crates containing the 6 tons of fossilized resin had vanished completely into thin air. The absolute crown jewel of imperial art had dissolved into the fog of war, leaving behind a blank space on the walls of history and a deadly trail of unanswered questions. The vanishing of the Golden Room did not mark the end of its story. Instead, it unleashed a localized curse that systematically silenced anyone who crept too close to the truth. In the immediate aftermath of the Allied victory, a dedicated intelligence task force was established to track the missing treasure across the devastated ruins of occupied Germany. But investigators quickly realized that a silent, invisible network of protectors was actively burying the evidence. A high-ranking Soviet counterintelligence major, having finally secured a rendezvous with a high-level German witness who promised to reveal the exact coordinates of the secret subterranean vault, rushed toward the meeting location on a dark, deserted country road. In the middle of the night, an invisible wire, strung tightly across the highway by unknown hands, violently decapitated the officer as his vehicle sped forward. When backup teams raided the informant's home hours later, they found the witness slumped over his desk, silently strangled to death before a single word could be recorded. Decades later, a brilliant investigative historian who had dedicated 20 years of his life to charting the secret wartime logistics of the amber transports, sent a triumphant letter to his closest colleague, stating that he had finally traced the coordinates to a hidden military bunker network and was preparing to hold an international press conference. Less than 3 weeks later, his body was discovered in a remote forest clearing, his abdomen brutally slashed open with a common kitchen knife, in what authorities hastily ruled an improbable suicide. Shortly after his death, the lead researcher compiling a definitive academic volume on the room's final days suddenly collapsed and died from an unexplained, rapid organ failure. Despite being a perfectly healthy middle-aged man, it became terrifyingly clear that the 6 tons of stolen gold were guarded by forces that considered human life entirely disposable. The stone that had masterfully preserved the violent deaths of prehistoric insects for millions of years was now preserving its own modern secrets through a legacy of sudden, calculated execution. While the phantom chambers of vanished kings remain buried somewhere in the silent, unforgiving concrete of forgotten bunkers, the living descendants of those ancient Baltic forests are still yielding their secrets to a world that desperately needs them. Today, we no longer need to wage bloody campaigns along frozen coastlines or enforce draconian laws to possess this golden substance. Instead, our interaction with it has migrated from the opulent palaces of emperors directly into the sterile, high-tech laboratories of the 21st century. This prehistoric resin, which began its journey as a crude defense mechanism against a boring beetle, has evolved into a vital cornerstone of modern material science, biological engineering, and environmental technology. If you step inside the massive industrial facilities of the Primorsky Quarry in the Kaliningrad region, the single location on Earth that commands over 90% of the planet's remaining industrial reserves, you will not see artisans carving delicate trinkets for royal collectors. Instead, you'll witness colossal water cannons violently tearing through massive walls of a dense, glaucous sediment known to geology as the Blue Earth. This ancient, clay-rich stratum, buried up to 60 meters beneath the surface, is the final resting place of millions of tons of fossilized resin that accumulated over 45 million years ago. The high-pressure torrents of water wash away the heavy mud, causing the buoyant, lightweight golden nuggets to break free and float to the surface of massive separation pools like a harvest of frozen suns. From these industrial extraction pits, the material is no longer sent to jewelry workshops, but is systematically routed into advanced chemical reactors, where its unique macromolecular architecture is broken down to harvest its true power, succinic acid. In an era where humanity is drowning in a catastrophic deluge of synthetic, petroleum-based plastics that refuse to rot, this ancient organic polymer has emerged as an unexpected environmental savior. By analyzing the natural cross-linking behavior that allowed prehistoric tree resin to harden into an indestructible geological vault, modern material scientists are synthesizing revolutionary new compounds like polybutylene succinate. This is a cutting-edge, fully biodegradable polymer engineered to replace the toxic packaging filling our landfills. Unlike conventional plastics that require hundreds of years to disintegrate into microscopic, poisonous fragments, these new materials, born from the chemical logic of a 40-million-year-old forest, can be completely reassimilated by the soil within a few short months. The defensive chemical shield that saved ancient trees from decay is now being deployed to shield our entire biosphere from the consequences of human industrial waste. Yet, despite this profound technological triumph, Our relationship with this golden stone remains deeply entangled with a strange, lingering ancestral memory that modern science cannot seem to erase. Walk through the bustling pharmacies and wellness markets of contemporary Europe, and you will find thousands of parents purchasing smooth, unpolished amber necklaces to place around the necks of teething infants. The underlying cultural belief is deceptively simple. It is widely claimed that as the stone rests against the warm skin of the child, microscopic amounts of succinic acid are naturally absorbed into the bloodstream, acting as a potent, organic anti-inflammatory that dulls the constant pain of emerging teeth. It is a multi-million-dollar modern industry built entirely on faith. If you question the leading pediatric associations or look for rigorous double-blind clinical trials to support this practice, you will find an absolute scientific void. There is no empirical data proving that a fossilized stone can transmit therapeutic chemical doses through dry human skin, and medical professionals routinely warn of the very real physical danger of strangulation. Yet the sales continue to break records year after year. We mock the ancient Roman elites who swallowed powdered amber dissolved in wine to cure their heart palpitations. Yet we replicate their exact behavior in our modern nurseries. This enduring obsession exposes a fascinating vulnerability in the human psyche. Our collective, instinctual memory of a stone that healed and protected for thousands of years remains vastly more powerful than the most advanced laboratory data. We do not just buy a piece of jewelry. We are buying a direct line of communication to a deep, comforting past. This paradox brings us face to face with the ultimate, humbling truth contained within this golden capsule of deep time. For generations, humanity has viewed this material through the distorted lens of our own immense hubris. We treated it as a luxury to be hoarded, an empire-building currency, a decorative backdrop for totalitarian wars, or a chemical raw material to be exploited for industrial profit. We look at a tiny, transparent pebble holding an ancient insect and marvel at how effectively it has served as our historical playground. But when you step away from the commercial display cases and look into its translucent heart with true cosmic humility, the narrative completely inverts. The stone does not belong to us. We are merely a brief, hyperactive blip on its infinite chronological radar. Consider the absolute crushing scale of the reality it represents. A tiny gall mite, less than a millimeter in size, became entangled in a sticky drop of resin 230 million years ago during the dawn of the Triassic period. While that microscopic creature sat perfectly insulated within its golden stasis chamber, the entire face of our planet was violently torn apart and reassembled. Supercontinents fractured and drifted across thousands of miles of ocean. The entire lineage of the dinosaurs rose to planetary dominance, ruled for 140 million years, and was abruptly obliterated by an asteroid impact. Global ice ages advanced and retreated like slow tides. Mammals evolved from small, burrowing rodents into tool-using primates, and the entirety of human history, from the first campfire to the launch of space exploration, occurred in what amounts to a collective thermodynamic breath. Through all of this planetary chaos, the microscopic mite remained completely undisturbed, its fragile legs, translucent abdomen, and minute sensory hairs preserved with such flawless fidelity that a modern biologist can study its anatomy under an electron microscope and find it virtually identical to the mites living in our gardens today. The stone did not just survive the history of our world, it bypassed it entirely. Ultimately, this golden mineraloid is the ultimate antidote to human arrogance. It serves as a stark, beautiful, and slightly ominous reminder that the Earth does not require our permission to remember its own biography. Our grandest monuments, our stolen rooms of gold, and our most sophisticated scientific empires will eventually crumble into an anonymous layer of crushed gray sediment, entirely erased by the relentless machinery of geology. But long after the last human city has been reclaimed by the wilderness, and our species has vanished into the quiet depths of the evolutionary timeline, these small, golden drops of fossilized blood will still be resting silently within the deep strata of the planet. They will continue to hold their ancient, suffocating secrets, safely protecting the final, panicked moments of a prehistoric hunt or the microscopic breath of an extinct atmosphere. They are the only true custodians of our world's violent, beautiful reality, proving that while humanity scrambles to record its fleeting achievements, the Earth itself has already written the definitive archive of time, sealed forever in a drop of frozen sun.